Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our SEC football predictions today, and our next team lost a lot of talent to the NFL last season, but got a huge quarterback transfer in the offseason and are looking to stay relevant in the SEC West. They are the LSU Tigers. LSU returns 10 starters from a team that went 9-3 in the regular season last year. However, one of those losses came in shocking fashion at home to Troy of the Sun Belt Conference. But Ed Ogeron and his team were able to turn things back around the following week, winning on the road at Florida and then beating Auburn in upset fashion in Baton Rouge. They closed out the season with 3 straight wins before losing in dramatic fashion in the final minute to Notre Dame in their bowl game to finish 9-4 on the season. So a very respectable year. But this year, I see this being the weakest LSU team that we've seen in recent memory. 5 starters on offense, 5 starters return on defense. They got a big quarterback transfer in Joe Burrow, so obviously that's going to help them because before he transferred, we really didn't know what to expect from the LSU quarterbacks. We were probably going to see them start Miles Brennan, who I know a lot of people at LSU and myself were concerned on how that was going to go, but at least they get a somewhat experienced quarterback in Burrow who is eligible to play immediately. So that's a big boost for this LSU offense, who also doesn't return a big running back. This is a program that's had major running backs over the past couple of years. Stephen Ridley, Jeremy Hill, Darius Geis, Leonard Fournette. And this year they don't have one of those big playmakers at that running back position, and then lost a big wide receiver in DJ Chark to the NFL last year as well. The defense led by Greedy Williams and Devin White at the linebacker position. That's going to be a big boost for them, and the defense will by far be LSU's strength this year. Joe Burrow will help on the offensive side of the ball, but I have more faith in LSU's defense and Dave Aranda than I do on the offensive side of the ball. They kicked things off this season against Miami on a Sunday night in Arlington at Dallas Stadium. This is a big game, one that everybody is waiting for. Everybody's been talking about this whole offseason. This Sunday, September 2nd, cannot get here fast enough because it's a big, big game. LSU and Miami live from Arlington. And Miami returning 14 starters from a team that nearly made the college football playoff last year, just had a horrible end to the season, getting upset against Pittsburgh and then getting demolished by Clemson in the ACC championship game. But this is a team that returns a solid quarterback in Malik Rozier and 7 starters on the defensive side of the ball, including all seniors in the secondary. So for the LSU offense that might be struggling a little bit in the season opener, I can see this game being a very good defensive battle. A lot of people had questions about Malik Rozier at Miami. Was he really the right guy for the job? I thought he did fine last year, but there were still questions surrounding his leadership and his skills as they went on a little bit of a losing streak towards the end of the season. But I think Miami has a very solid defense. LSU has a very solid defense. Both of those offenses, not too great, but if I had to choose one offense that I think was better than the other, I would go with Miami. I think they're a little more experienced there, and anything that LSU's offense can produce, I think, could get shut down by a pretty veteran defensive line for Miami, but most importantly, that secondary led by all seniors. So Joe Burrow, I think, is going to have a tough time throwing in his first game as an LSU Tiger, and I'm going to give Miami a big win here in Arlington over LSU, and they're going to start off the season 0-1. Return to Death Valley, get a win over Southeast Louisiana, no problem there. And then go on the road to Auburn, which LSU did beat in Baton Rouge last year. I believe they were down 20-7 in that game. Auburn looked like they were on the way to a sure victory. And then they had that big punt return LSU did that kind of sparked things and were able to come back and win that game over Auburn. And many thought that kind of ended Auburn's any chance of an SEC championship or national championship hopes. But they ended up making the SEC championship anyway with that big win over Alabama. This game being at Jordan-Hare Stadium with it, once again, an LSU team that I think is their weakest in the longest time. It's been a long time since I've seen an LSU team this weak and this thin on both sides of the ball. Auburn returning Jarrett Stidham at QB, still a solid list of wide receivers there, and the defensive line I think is going to give LSU some fits in this game. Also having home field advantage. I don't like LSU's chances here on the road at Auburn. Another loss there. Come back home for Louisiana Tech, get a win there. Ole Miss, a team that I've repeatedly said that no one should sleep on, that could come into a couple places or when teams visit Ole Miss, could pull off a few upsets this year. I really, really love Ole Miss's offense. Jordan Tayamu, those wide receivers. The only problem is their defense. Their defense is still going to be weak. It was weak last year. I see it being weak again this year. This game is going to be played in Death Valley. LSU went on the road last year, stole one away from Ole Miss. I think they do it again this year. Big win here against Ole Miss to get their first win in conference play. So that's a very solid win there. And then this is going to be the key and defining stretch of LSU's season, the one that will determine if they can maybe win 8 games or the one that will determine if they get to a bowl game or hover around the 6 or 7 win mark at Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi State. 2 of those games coming at home, and as we all know, Death Valley, by far one of the toughest places to play in college football, especially when they are able to host a night game. We'll start here with a road game at Florida, where LSU was able to win last year down in the Swamp, thanks to a late missed PAT. They won that game 17-16. This year, Dan Mullen, head coach of the Gators, moving over from Mississippi State, bringing in 19 returning starters. And yes, returning starters do not mean immediate success for a certain team, but it definitely helps when you have a team, whether they were really good last year or really weak the year before, to come in, to work together with the same group of people, to form that bond, and to get better and better and learn in those position groups. So this Florida team, I think, could surprise a lot of people in the East. And I think with it being down in the Swamp, a very hostile environment, and with Dan Mullen being the great offensive mind that he is, I think he's going to be able to exploit the LSU defense. And I think Florida gets a win here at home over like I said, weaker LSU team. They get a home game against Georgia. Obviously, the consensus favorite to win the SEC East, potentially make a return trip to the college football playoff. And this is another game where I can see, kind of like the Miami game, this being a defensive battle. Georgia returns 5 starters on the defensive side of the ball as well. And they were really, really dominant on defense last year. The offense was a bit of a problem, I thought, last year. But they really changed my mind about midway through the year. Had great running backs, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Jake Fromm coming in, did a great job there. But this year, LSU hosting the Bulldogs in Death Valley. I can easily see this being a 2:30 CBS game. This is going to be a huge, huge game and a really fun one to watch. Fairly low scoring, I would think. And I think Georgia's defense is going to be able to stop LSU's offense a little bit. And the same thing with LSU's defense stopping Georgia's offense. However, if I had to choose an offense like Miami that I think can make a play down the stretch late, it's going to be Georgia. You have, I think, a better quarterback in Jake Fromm over Joe Burrow, DeAndre Swift at running back, Nicole Hardman at wide receiver, a very solid wide receiver core there for the Bulldogs. I think they come into Death Valley, steal a game here, and LSU loses back-to-back games. Obviously not looking good. They're 3-4 coming into October 20th against Mississippi State. And like I said, this is by far the defining stretch. Mississippi State is LSU's homecoming game. Yes, Mississippi State is coming off a bye coming into this game. But I think Ed Orgeron is going to have his team ready. They're coming off 2 straight losses here to 2 SEC opponents. They need to turn things around if they want to have a shot at a bowl game. Mississippi State, I think, remember last year LSU losing that game 37-7 in Starkville. LSU's going to want revenge. I think the LSU defense wakes up for homecoming, revenge on their mind, shuts down Nick Fitzgerald and what should be a very good Mississippi State offense. LSU gets a very, very big win here in Death Valley. A bye week going into the annual Alabama game. As we all know, Alabama will get their bye week as well. And LSU hosts the Crimson Tide this year. And as I said in my Alabama video, the last time that the Crimson Tide visited Death Valley, it was a 10-0 win for Alabama. Very, very low scoring. LSU just couldn't generate any offense. And really, defense played spectacular, but you can only hold up for so long. And I think that's going to be the case again this year. Tua Tagovailoa, the projected starter for Alabama. This is going to be, I think, the toughest environment he has played in his young career, coming into Death Valley in what will be a night game as well. And I think LSU's defense is going to be able to rattle him and shut him down for most of the game. So once again, I expect this game to be very low scoring. Because as I've said before, this will be the strength of LSU's team. Their defense will be their strength. I think they shut down Alabama for a little bit. But once again, just like 2 years ago, Alabama pulls away and escapes for a very narrow victory. Probably somewhere between around the 10-point margin, maybe a little less than that. But nonetheless, Alabama getting a win in Death Valley here. And then LSU travels to Arkansas, battle for the Golden Boot. Obviously, another great rivalry here. But Arkansas bringing in Chad Morris and a new head coach. Not many know what to expect there. I think their offense is going to struggle a lot. And if you put a struggling offense against what's going to be a solid LSU defense, things aren't going to go good for the Razorbacks. I think LSU gets a much-needed win on the road against the Razorbacks here. It shouldn't be much of a problem for them. They defeated the Razorbacks, I believe, 33-10 last year in Death Valley and 38-10 the year before in Fayetteville, and that was a much better Razorback team 2 years ago. Then they come back home for a game against Rice. That's going to be a win for LSU. And then the season finale against Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. They return 16 starters and Nick Starkel, and LSU has owned Texas A&M since they have joined the SEC back in 2012. I don't think they have lost to Texas A&M, if I'm correct on that. In this game, being down in College Station, I think Texas A&M breaks the streak. I think they break the streak thanks to home field advantage and thanks to a better offense. LSU, who knows? I mean, this is not going to be their most ideal season. as I've said, they're usually hovering around that 8-win, 9-win mark. So is their morale going to be down? How motivated are they going to be? I mean, they just cracked bowl eligibility here against Rice. So how motivated will they be going into this game? I'm not really sure, but I know Jimbo Fisher's going to have his guys hyped up for it. I think LSU comes on the road and loses this game to the Aggies and Jimbo Fisher, who's going to have Texas A&M back into the national title conversation, back up into the national rankings sooner rather than later. And so this is going to put LSU at a 6-6 mark on the year. Now, I know a lot of people will criticize me for this, say it's not possible, but like I said, this is by far, look at the stats, by far the weakest LSU team we've seen in recent memory, and I do not base my predictions on this, but if you take a look, 6-6 is what the FPI, the Football Power Index, has the LSU Tigers at. So that's something else to keep in mind. It's not anything being biased or giving LSU too many road losses or home losses. It's just what it is. Only 10 returning starters, a very tough schedule. If LSU can come around and pull off some big upsets, maybe they can pull off that Miami upset. Maybe they can upset Georgia at home. Maybe they can go on the road and steal one from A&M, who might be a little bit mediocre this year. I mean, they are a couple plays away, a couple games away from finishing with an 8-win record, maybe a 9-win record as well. But I'm just not seeing it this year with this type of team. But as we all know, anything can happen in college football. But with this type of record, I also do see Ed Orgeron probably being fired from his job as head coach of the Tigers. He's on the hot seat, I think, already after the Troy loss of last year and the way the year ended for the Tigers last season. A 6-6 record is not going to help with that, and this would also be the first time the LSU finished with less than 8 wins since 1998 when they went 4-7. It's just looking like that type of year for the Tigers, but I would not be surprised, knowing LSU, if they could come in here and pull off a couple upsets. So, as I've said before, if you've not followed us on Twitter, please go ahead and do that at Gridiron Expert, not the Gridiron Expert, just at Gridiron Expert, and also on Instagram at the Gridiron Expert. We're on all the social media platforms now except for Facebook. And as always, make sure you please subscribe here on YouTube. We're continuing to grow, and we'd love to hear your guys' debates and your predictions in the comments below. That's always great to see. So thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.